This is the new iPhone 13 Pro, and this the new iPhone 13 Pro Max. They both have the same price as last year's 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max, but have upgraded cameras, a bigger battery, and a high refresh rate display. For the third year in a row, Apple released two Pro models. And what's fantastic is whether you get the 13 Pro or 13 Pro Max, you're getting the same phone, same updated cameras, and same A15 Bionic processor. So really the choice is, do you go Pro or not Pro? And if you want a bigger version of the 13 Pro, you get a 13 Pro Max. If you want a smaller form of the 13, you get the 13 Mini. And by the way, I have a whole other review video for the 13 and 13 Mini. Make sure you check that out. Now, the iPhone 13 Pro starts at $999 and the 13 Pro Max at $1,099, and that's for 128 gigabytes of storage. And for the first time, you have the option to get 1 terabyte of storage on an iPhone. And that extra storage pushes the price of a 13 Pro to $1,499 and the 13 Pro Max to $1,599. Yeah, that's a lot of storage and a lot of money. Design-wise, the 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max have the same squared-off look as the 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max. The back has a matte finish, and the stainless steel sides are still glossy. Both phones come in 4 finishes: graphite, gold, silver, and Sierra blue, and I really like the Sierra blue finish. In some lighting, it reads light gray. In other lighting, it looks Carolina blue, a la the UNC Tar Heels. The notch is 20% smaller, and maybe a better way to describe it is that it's not as wide. But yeah, there is still a notch, and I think it's fair to say that it annoys me 20% less. Both phones are thicker and weigh more. The iPhone 13 Pro adds 15 grams, and the 13 Pro Max packs an additional 12 grams. In use, I noticed the extra weight on the 13 Pro a little more. Both phones feel solid and robust. They have what Apple calls ceramic shield covering the display, and an IP68 rating for dust and water resistance. The 13 Pro has a 6.1-inch screen, and the 13 Pro Max a 6.7-inch screen. In everyday use, the displays are brighter and has what Apple calls Pro Motion, meaning the iPhone, for the first time ever, supports a high refresh rate, and this high refresh rate goes up to 120 hertz. Now, depending on what's being shown on the screen of your phone, the 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max will switch the refresh rate between 10 and 120 hertz. This helps save on battery, as well as, do we really need to see our email at 120 hertz? Probably not. But this is a similar approach Samsung took with the Galaxy S21 Ultra. In use, the screen looks stellar. I mean, animations look smooth, graphics look crisp, even mundane things like scrolling look better. The camera bumps on both phones are bigger and stick out a bit more, and that's because of what's underneath. The main camera has a new sensor, which is the largest sensor ever put into an iPhone. That, combined with a faster f1.5 aperture lens, equates to improved light gathering. Then the ultra-wide has a new autofocus sensor and lens that also improves light gathering. And last, the lens on the telephoto camera is longer with a 3 times optical zoom. When we talk about the ability for these cameras to gather more light, where I noticed the difference the most wasn't in a radically brighter photo necessarily, but in a faster shutter speed, which results in freezing action a little bit better, like people riding bikes or this car. Also, taking night mode photos is faster. And something interesting, so night mode photos from the iPhone 11 series and 12 series had a bad light source reflection problem. On the 13 and 13 Pro Max, it's still there a little bit, especially if you have a shot of string lights or video especially, and it's a little bit darker. But overall, it's drastically better. Now, do all of these improvements mean the cameras are much better? Yes and no. To test out the cameras, I took the iPhone 13 Pro Max and the iPhone 13 to Fluor Field, which hosted the Feast of the Field, part of Greenville, South Carolina's yearly Euphoria food event. And if you're into food photography, the 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max have a new macro mode, which triggers automatically when you get within a few centimeters of your subject. Now that the ultra-wide has autofocus, you can get some pretty solid close-ups of food, coffee, or even this video nightmare of ants crawling all over a discarded grapefruit. Ew. In good lighting, and even in medium lighting, I found macro photography pretty solid. Now, it's not on the same level as a mirrorless camera and a dedicated macro lens, but it's one of the better implementations of a macro mode that I've seen on a phone, and yeah, there are a lot. But when I was at the Michelin dinner for the food event, I learned two things. The first is that gooseberries are delicious. The next is that in low lighting, macro mode is a little problematic. So for example, here's a photo I took of a piece of espresso rubbed tuna. Now, I don't think the results in this photo to be that close to that appetizer was worth it. But I took the same photo with the iPhone 13 using its main camera. I was a couple more inches away and the photo looks so much better. In low lighting, macro photography isn't great, and you probably stick to the wide angle camera, which is going to take better photos in that kind of situation. Overall, the improvements to the ultra wide camera are definitely noticeable, and macro photography is decent. The 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max also get a new feature called Cinematic Mode, which is a blast to use and experiment with. It uses the cameras on the back of the phone to create a 1080p video at 30 frames per second. But what makes the video so compelling is that it has a gorgeous out of focus quality. The foreground or background can be out of focus, and it's all because of doing a focus pull. So in this video, I focus on Chef Eugenia Talley, owner of the Herbal Pharmacy, and then it focuses away from her and onto the very beautiful and very tasty vegan sloppy joe that she was showing me. The effect is impressive. And what's great is you can let the phone do its thing and choose when to change the focus from one person to another. You can tap on the screen and manually change it yourself during the recording, or even better, after the recording. Now, here's the first video I shot of Eugenia, where the phone prioritizes the people in the scene, and rightly so. And here is the same video after I edited the focus points to move from Eugenia to the sloppy joe and then back to Eugenia. I also increased the depth of field. Being able to edit who's in and out of focus after the fact is pretty brilliant. Also, the main rear camera isn't the only camera capable of cinematic mode. You can use the front camera to film cinematic selfies, like this one when I sampled a lamb croquette with a micro baster filled with pomegranate gastrique. It was delicious. Are cinematic videos perfect? No way! But they are fun, and they're a great way to express your creativity. Cinematic mode needs a good amount of light to use it. In fact, when conditions are too dark, you'll get a pop-up prompting you to turn on your flash. Also, I noticed that fast-moving, non-human subjects like water being poured out of a spout or a shot of espresso being brewed were hard for cinematic mode to keep in focus. Then there's that telephoto lens I mentioned earlier. And what's nice about this is it gets you closer to your subject without needing to move your feet. It has a 3 times optical zoom. Last year's was this 2.5 times, and it has a 15 times digital zoom. Now this doesn't compete with the periscope zoom lenses that we see on Android phones like the Galaxy S21 Ultra or the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III. I welcome the longer focal length, but when it comes to image quality, it's still about the same as it was with the 2.5 times telephoto camera on last year's 12 Pro Max. Processing all of this is Apple's new A15 Bionic chip. The GPU on the Pro models has 5 cores instead of the 4 cores on the 13 and 13 mini. In my time with the phones, it didn't have any trouble handling gaming, cinematic mode editing, or just having a bunch of apps open at the same time. I've had all 4 models of the iPhone 13 for about 5 days, which means there are still some features I need more time with to test before I can go in depth and give it a critique. But let's wrap up by talking about a few of those. First, the iPhone 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max both have a larger battery. I didn't have any trouble getting through a day, even a hot and humid day where I captured a bunch of photos and videos. Right now, I'm running the phone through CNET's arsenal of battery tests and will update my written review with all of the results. Next, iOS 15 on the iPhone 13 and 13 Pro Max is pretty wonderful. It adds a bunch of features but doesn't mess with the status quo you already have on your phone. I really like focus mode. And if you want a more in-depth look at iOS 15, check out my video showcasing the best features and biggest changes. Next, all of the iPhones 13 get a new feature called Photography Styles, which lets you choose between standard, aka the default iPhone look, and 4 styles: vibrant, rich contrast, warm, and cool. Apple says that these are more than just filters because your phone analyzes the different parts of your subject to add the look you want without, for example, making someone's skin look overly orange. Also, all of this happens during the act of taking a photo and is baked into your file. And last, these will be the first phones to support the Apple ProRes video codec. ProRes optimizes video files and is especially useful for people who color grade or use editing software like Final Cut Pro 10 or Adobe Premiere Pro. ProRes video files have a lower amount of compression, but take up a lot of room, hence why that 1 terabyte storage tier is going to be very important. Sadly, ProRes isn't available yet to test and should be out later this year. So that's all I've got. If you want to learn more about the iPhone 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max, or buy one, check out the links in the description. But now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about the new Pro phones from Apple? Are you getting one? If so, what are you upgrading from? Throw your thoughts in the comments.